So it's 7 o'clock, and looks like I got a pretty good halo going on. So give me a minute and let me deal with that problem. I don't know if that's going to help us much. Let's open the window some more to get some light in on us. Hopefully we got enough light going on here for you. Alrighty, so let's get started here. It's a little after 7. So what I did ahead of time is I set up a bunch of separate Proxmox servers that you're seeing here, so we can play around with a couple of things. I plan on playing around with two different topics tonight, and maybe a third depending on time. But the first topic that we wanted to touch upon was something, well, both were actually something that was suggested by users. The first one being, can we create a cluster with a server having a container or a VM in it? The second one was about migration, and I've set up a bunch of stuff so we can work through some scenarios there and test it out. But let's fire up the first two servers here of Proxmox and actually try out and see if we are able to add a VM and where or what VMs will cause us to error out, so we know. So I'm going to start the first one, and I'm going to start the second one, and then we'll open the console so that we can see them coming alive. I've already kind of pre-set up IP addresses and stuff up here, so we can move a little bit quicker. We'll see how that goes. Alright, so we got those two servers should be up. So if we head over, let's refresh the page, make sure that we log in to the new instance. Alright, so here's our first server up, and this should be our second server up. And I already went ahead and applied updates so we didn't have any problems with them like we did in the last live stream, or potentially did in the last live stream. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually start here at PVE1, and I'm going to download a template and try creating a container so that we can find out if there is actually problems with joining a cluster if you have VMs active. So we got a template image downloaded, and let's make just a real simple template here so that we have something on this server. All right, so now that that's created, we should be able to go ahead and head to Data Center, and let's start by creating a cluster, just like we did in the last live stream, right? All right, so we were able to actually create the cluster with a VM in place. So it looks like the head cluster machine, whatever you want to refer to it, or the lead node, the creating machine, can have VMs or containers available inside of them when you create the cluster. Now we can get some join information up here, but let's head over to the second machine and do the same thing. Looking for Ubuntu 2204. Download it. And we'll make a container here. And we'll just simply call it test. Grab our template. Run through this awful fast, because we're not going to do anything with them. Now, since we have that, let's go over to Data Center and try joining these. So we'll click Join Cluster, copy information, and we'll paste the information, giving the password to the first server, just like we did in the previous live stream. And here you go. It failed. Now, what happens if we just simply get rid of that virtual guest? Will it join? Or will there be problems from the lead server having a virtual machine or container on it there? All right, so let's try joining this time. So it looks like we were indeed able to join the two machines together with the first, or the lead server, having a VM or container on it. But if the second joining machine has anything on it, it's not going to work. I hope that answers the viewer's question well enough so that they have a good idea what they're doing. So if you're coming along and you have an operating cluster or an operating server that you have running stuff on and you want to add an extra machine and cluster them together, as long as that newly installed server has no containers or VMs on it, you can actually create a cluster and then add machines to that cluster. So the next question we really got into, and we're doing really well on time today. I hope that we can make that 45 minutes to an hour, but I have an extra bonus content if we get close, so let's see where we're at here. All right, so the next question is about migration, right? Moving containers or VMs from one server to another server in the scenario of either a server shutting down or a server coming up. Now there's some things we need. We've created our cluster already, which is the first step. The next step is to install some software called Ceph. Ceph is found here under Data Center and Ceph, and we have just an install option. Now we click install, and we're going to start the installation. And hello to everybody on the stream, and thank you for joining us. So, a great way to help contribute to virtualize everything and contribute to what information is shared or what we try testing, which most of the stuff I'm going to try to do on these live streams is like testing and development work and learning. So, I'm actually able to sit here and learn about Proxmox with you guys. And a live stream would be to suggest some ideas if an idea gets suggested enough, or if I like it, we'll consider featuring it on a live stream. All right, so we're at PV1, and that's the right IP address. I've had some scenarios when installing Ceph where the monitor node and the public network IP address differ. And the installation and setup of Ceph didn't work at that point. I just had to go in and change the monitor node so that it matched the right IP address or vice versa. But in this case, it's all right. And we can hit finish now here. So now we have everything we need to migrate this container that we created a minute ago for the test process to this machine. So let's go ahead and start up the container and see what happens. All right, so with the container running, let's go ahead and click migrate. Now, I kind of have an idea what's going to happen, and I'm unsure if there's anything we can do about changing the fact of how it behaves. I think it's kind of written into the rules of Proxmox, but um, let's try it out and see if we can figure it out and see what else we can try doing to maybe speed up downtime. So let's hit migrate, and we're going to move it to PVE2 and hit migrate. So if you notice here, it actually shuts the container down before moving it across the network to the second installation of Proxmox. In my case, they're virtualized here, but it would be a second actual piece of hardware in your scenario or most normal scenarios for Proxmox. And you can see how long this is taking. So it has to move the entire set of data from the drive of one machine to the drive of the other machine. This is actually taking so long that I'm considering closing this out just to keep our video moving. And so we can see that our migration is running down here, and it's actually now copied the container and it started it back up. So that's the process. There will be some downtime using migration like that. Now, there are some limitations we're going to run into in the next scenario, and I believe them mostly just to be with the scenario we have a bunch of machines and stuff running over here, and this is a relatively low-powered machine. In the last live stream, somebody asked me about the specs, and there's the specs of this machine for you right there. Like, this is a first generation A6 APU, fairly lightweight. Like, this isn't some powerhouse. This isn't even an R710, which, by the way, we'll start using sometime here in the near future when my life allows me to get to the point of getting that in and getting some of the network set up around that. Stay tuned. That'll be happening, hopefully relatively soon. But back to that, or right now, this data container right here that I created, that contains a Samba share. And let's try to add the Samba share into the data center and put a container on that Samba share and then see how migration behaves at that point. So if we come over here to data center and then we go to storage, we can actually now use the user interface or the web interface to add entire shares into the machine. So we can go to add, and then we can add an SMB mount. Now I'm going to give it an ID of data. Now this is entirely arbitrary. I can call it whatever I want. I don't have to have it the same name as my container. I don't have to have it match anything. It's whatever I want to call it here and now in my cluster. I'm going to enter the IP address of this particular server and the login credentials. So again, this is just something that I set up for today and for us learning. And we can see that Samba share is available. So now we can pick a content, and disk image is pretty good, but we're going to be using containers because they're a little bit more lightweight on this fairly lightweight server that we're running here. And let's add it in. Now this is cool. You can see that by adding it at data center, it added to both the PVE1 and PVE2 instance of Proxmox at the same time. See, it's here and it's here. So under PVE1, or actually we can kind of see a little bit more stuff change now that we created a cluster. So if we hit create CT, under nodes, where before we'd only have one node name, we can actually see that we have both nodes available here for choosing. So if I wanted to put an image here, I could. But let's put the image on one for now. And So there's my sound back. Don't know if that changed anything else here, but we're back. Uh, if there's anything you guys missed that you want me to repeat or recover, um, go ahead and let me know in the comments. But we're back here at the data under storage, and the data tab, or the data here, instead of the LVM, is where we're going to store this. This is actually what we created a minute ago in the data center tab for the NAS storage. Now we can hit next, and we're just going to give it like minimum resources again, and I'm going to let DHCP assign IP address so I don't have to worry about it, and move through it quickly. All right, so we've made our container. And let's go ahead and fire up this container so it's running. Now, again, remember right now, we have two virtualized instances of Proxmox running on one computer that are then virtualizing more containers on top of them. This is not an optimal solution as we move things around and test. But it is a good demonstration and a good way to learn how to work with some of this content. So it looks like I wasn't able to start that up. I've run into some problems with this before in a little bit of testing. So let's go ahead and stop this container and see if we can start it up here. Now, I really believe this to be not a limitation of Proxmox, but just a limitation of the limited amount of resources that we really have to do this. So the same server is both creating the container, hosting the container that is running our network, and running our Proxmox instances. So let's go ahead now and see if we can start it up again. So if you wonder why I'm looking around a little bit, what's going on is I have two extra monitors in front of me above my laptop, actually tied to a different computer. And that's where I'm looking at the statistics and the information from the live stream that's coming at me, your comment feed and everything else. And I see that Mr. Editor is actually gone ahead and put some information in there if you guys would like to check it out. Mr. Editor is kind of my colleague and my peer in this endeavor. And yeah, so feel free to chat with him in the live stream chat if you would like. We noticed that we did indeed have a problem. Now, I'm going to move on. I really don't believe that this is necessarily a problem with my setup or with the software. It's actually a problem with the setup we have. And I apologize for that. I don't really have a good solution for it here at the time. We're definitely working with some pretty low-end hardware and working every day to increase that. I have plans to bring in an R710 and a data server or a NAS type server, in the near future. We just don't have the spaces or resources to set that up. But let's go ahead and try to migrate this container that we've placed on our NAS and watch how much quicker it migrated from the previous time. So we're going to move it over to PVE2 and watch. You see how quick that moved? We weren't 10 seconds moving that, even on this fairly low end resource. Now let's try starting it again because I really want to see if I can start it up. Yeah, and communication is failing. We just don't have enough resources here. So the last thing I planned to really do with you guys is to try to look at some high availability. We have enough time in the live stream to do that. I'm unsure how successful we will be tonight. Oh, it started up. That's cool. Let's try, before we get into some of that high availability learning, I haven't even tested any of that. Some of this I played with a little bit beforehand, but um, let so let's go ahead and click migrate, and we're going back to PVE1, and we're pressing migrate, and it's going to shut down the container. Now it moved the container quite quickly as to expected, and it's trying to start it again. And it's actually running. So the migration still says that it's finished and it's still moving, so I'm not quite sure if it's completely done. I would say it's probably not, but you can see how much faster that actually happens. So there was a migration problem. It didn't start. Well, I believe that, like I said before, to be a hardware issue. I don't know if some of this high availability that we're going into here in a minute is going to be affected by that. But let's go ahead and take a look at high availability for a minute or two. And if we continue to have problems, maybe in a live stream in the near future, we'll touch back on it and see if we can learn some more about that. So I'm going to start up the third Proxmox system. And so in other words, I'm going to tax our resources even more. So high availability requires 3 systems for votes, by my understanding. So that's why I'm starting up a third machine, and we're going to actually add it into the cluster. I'm just looking at my loads real quick here, seeing if I can see any reason. Anyways, let's refresh. All right, so let's go over here and go add this in. So we'll get our join information and we'll copy it again. And we'll join. Just as we did before. If all goes well, we should We should see PVE3 come up here in a second. There we go. And data is being added back in. We go over here to Ceph. We should see monitoring, I hope, on the third node quite quickly. That's interesting. I wonder if that's going to cause any problems. Now, I'd also like to note back on the first question that we touched upon, we had containers in the first server and the second server when we added the third server. So it's whatever new system you're adding that can't have a VM or a container. Systems that are pre-existing in the cluster are all good to have containers. So you can keep growing a cluster, it looks like, from that point. All right, so now under data center, we have HA. HA stands for high availability. And I believe the way this works is that we're going to be able to take a resource like this container 100 test that we have here, and we're going to be able to add it in. Right here, max restarts, max relocates. We can try, we'll give it 2 and see what happens. I don't have any groups configured. Requested state is started. So now let's raise some havoc and simulate a system going down, and then we'll jump back here and see what happens. Stop. All right. So PVE2 should be going down momentarily. There it is going down. And I believe we should see high availability try to look and move things. That's my belief. Now, I've tried none of this. This is a complete, test scenario here, right? I don't know what's going to happen. Let's see a refresh. PVE2 is down. It shows the container as running here on PVE2. It doesn't look like it's tried to move it at all. If I select the container and open a console, can I log into it? Yeah, so it failed. Interesting. Now this is the one that's actually on the server, so maybe that's the problem. Let's start this server back up and watch it come up. So we'll watch PVE2 come up. Now we'll shut this down so we're not, well, it's probably not even running at the moment. Let's see. Let's go ahead and migrate the 101 data test, which is the one that's actually stored on another server. And let's migrate it over here. We had problems starting it on PVE1, if you remember. So now we should be able to start it up, hopefully. So it's now running here on PVE3. I'm removing the old rule, and let's try adding data testing. All right, so now let's shut down that PVE3 server and see if this container actually moves a little bit. Incoming power failure. Simulated, of course. All right. So it looks like we may have noticed that PV3 is down. Said that, and it's here with a bad timestamp. It doesn't look like it's tried to move that container. Now, if we select the container and click migrate, let's see if we can send it up to the second one. So, because the server is down, there's nothing there. So, interesting. I wonder if we're doing something wrong, which is quite possible. I've never tested this. Like, we're doing this for the first time here on the live stream as a way of learning, of course, because that's what we want to do. So let's fire that back up. All right. So you can see the system, even though it's showing green here and showing that it's running, that you can actually see that it's started. Interesting. Definitely think we're going to need to do more research and touch upon this in another live stream. I don't think we've learned a little bit about normal basic behavior, but I don't think we've learned enough about what's going on and everything that's behaving. What I am wondering about, though, and you can see the mode is restart, right? So I just told it to migrate 101 to PVE2. It said it did that, and it actually looks like it did do a migration. So without, oh, and then it has to start it. All right. So it does shut it down, but it will move it. And it will start it back up, it looks like, which is what we learned prior. Interesting. I'm coming up on the end of this video, or what we plan to discuss in this video. We're getting pretty close to that 45 minutes. I could stay for an extra 15 minutes or so and discuss anything else. I notice we have 2 active viewers right now. Do any of you guys have suggestions for something you might want to cover? We'll see if we can look into it and try it with what we have here. Sorry about that. Mr. Editor was asking a question, and unfortunately, the keyboard to answer him was behind my screen. Probably not the best setup. Alrighty, well, looks like I'm going to end it there. Definitely feel free to drop a comment in the comment section later on, and I will look into this a little bit more and come up with a topic for the next live stream. We're planning to live stream 2 or 3 times a week around 7 o'clock, so please look forward and join us back. If a different day works for you or something, definitely reach out. I did a live stream, I believe, last Thursday and last Sunday, and they seem to work pretty well, but let us know if you have a different time. We definitely want to try to work with you a little bit and make the best time that we can for you. So with that, I guess, have a good night.